Do you see any strategy in TAP whatsoever in pricing? And if so, what is their strategy? Can you please?
I can't see any strategy in TAP. The strategy seems to be charge Portuguese consumers the highest possible airfares, and then when there's a crisis, expect the government to give you 2-3 billion to bail you out.
Supposedly, they would have that feeder and defeater position that they go to for long haul and then in smaller
But
flights.
TAP doesn't have that business. I mean, they do have a good long haul business to Latin America, accept that. Their short haul business, is disappearing because they can't compete with Ryanair or EasyJet or the other low fare airlines. They used to run frequent flights from Porto. They've now closed the base in Porto. So TAP is not the future for Portugal. Ryanair is.
What you're describing is a company destined to fail.
Yeah, of course, any company that needs 3 billion of state aid from a population of 10 million people, so they want 350 euros from every man, woman and child in Portugal, is not alone destined to fail, it deserves to fail.
You would be better off without TAP in Portugal, assuming their role as
I don't think that's true, because I think...
But that was the question, actually.
The question is, ultimately, TAP has a role to play in connecting, or in providing the long-haul flights to and from Latin America, Brazil, obviously, for historical reasons. But in short-haul, TAP can't compete, and its business will continue to decline. But they do have a valuable long-haul business. It's just, I think the future for TAP is as part of an alliance with an airline like IAG, with British Airways, Iberia, where, that those three airlines together, Iberia, TAP and British Airways, would have a huge control over European and Latin American flights.
But as you said previously, you do see Ryanair as a primary tourist carrier to Portugal.
Well,
to and from.
Yes, next year Ryanair is going to overtake TAP and become the largest airline to and from Portugal.
Is there any margin to negotiate that position with the Minister Pedro Nuno Santos, if it comes to that?
Thankfully, it has nothing to do with any government minister. I mean, we're continuing to expand. We've opened a new base in Madeira to help and support of the ministry. So, I don't want to be critical of the minister. We're adding 3 more aircraft here in Lisbon, but we could add another 4, 5, 6 aircraft in Lisbon if TAP would simply hand over the slots that they're not using, but they're cancelling on a weekly basis.
Do you think the European aviation is too politicized, namely TAP?
Yes. Well, I mean, it's not just TAP. I mean, you look at Alitalia, it's another basket case. It's lost money for 75 years in a row. So it's not just TAP. The problem with the European airline industry is, it is inexorably moving the same way that America did. 3 large connecting carriers. In Europe, that's going to be Lufthansa, Air France, BA, Iberia, and 1 large low fares airline in Europe, that's going to be Ryanair. It's Southwest in the States. And it is very difficult for any of the other airlines to find a role within that marketplace. So I think in the next 5 years, you will see more consolidation. The high fare airlines will migrate towards one of the 3 connecting carriers, and the low fare airlines will ultimately disappear because they can't compete with Ryanair on price or on cost.
Do you think TAP was a bigger threat when it was a private company?
No, I don't think. I mean, any airline that charges fares, TAP's average fare is about 180 euros. Any airline with an average fare of 180 euros that loses money almost every year isn't a threat to anybody except the taxpayers of Portugal, because it keeps draining scarce taxpayer funds away from Portuguese hospitals and Portuguese schools and flushes them down the TAP toilet. From
your perspective, in your analysis, where does that cost come from TAP? Where does is it personnel? Is it?
I don't know. I don't waste any time analysing TAP's costs. I mean, their fares are too high, and as a result of having very high fares, the demand is low. And because the demand is low, the unit costs are high because they have low load factors and low traffic. I mean, TAP carried, pre-COVID, 17 million passengers. Ryanair carried 150 million passengers. So we're 10 times their size. But that means we have a much lower cost per passenger because we're very efficient.
Is Europe doing its best to protect European airline companies?
I think they're doing their best. I mean, look, they're doing their best. Europe has done a terrific job with the digital COVID certificate that, which at least released intra-EU travel from the 1st of July. But wasting billions of state aid on failed airlines like Alitalia or TAP or LOT in Poland, that's doomed to fail. The money will be lost and will never be repaid to the taxpayers of Portugal, Italy or Poland.
How do you see those rumors today that Turkish Airlines could come and take a controlling position on TAP?
Well, Turkish Airlines can't take a controlling position because they're not a European airline. The European airlines under EU law must be majority EU owned. And I would fear for TAP and for Portugal. I mean, if Turkish were somehow to acquire a majority stake in TAP, all they would want to do is to take the Latin American traffic and transfer it over Istanbul. It wouldn't be to develop Lisbon, it would be to develop Istanbul. I don't think it'll happen though. I think the logical, longer term strategy for TAP will to become part of the IAG group, which has a large Central Caribbean and Latin American operation, and that's what TAP has.
That's one. If TAP continues to exist, because the other alternative is
TAP will continue to exist because the Portuguese taxpayer is going to give it 3 billion. There's an election coming in January. The politicians will be under pressure to rescue TAP, or somehow Portugal will be cut off, despite the fact that Portugal's largest airline is Ryanair, not TAP. So I think TAP will survive. The question is, once it survives, how do you stop it coming back to the government or to Portuguese taxpayers and demanding more billions of state aid?